we are gathered here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Deep Griha. Some of you have been here for the entirety of those 50 years. Some of you are newer supporters and members. Thank you for being here. It's been an amazing journey, and where hundreds of thousands of lives literally have been changed and affected in a positive way, where children's lives the arc of their lives has been radically changed through education, and women who have been downtrodden or suppressed by society have been uplifted through the work of Deep Griha in Pune. And it's been amazing for all of us who have been part of this journey, either all the way through or for some of it, to watch that happen. And so we're very grateful that all of you have shown up here. What an amazing crowd. Thank you for being here to show your support for Deep Griha. Some of us here in the US, led by Sandy Wood, saw that incredible change happening in Pune and were eager to help. And so was formed Deep Griha USA, a 501c3 organization 18 years ago. And the sole purpose of Deep Griha USA is to raise awareness and to raise money and to forward 100% of that money to India so that it can do good where it is actually needed. So today we're privileged to welcome Ashlesha Onawale, the director of Deep Griha USA. She has journeyed here all the way from Pune. She spent the last 3.5 weeks here traveling between West Virginia and Ohio, speaking with communities about the work that is happening, sharing amazing stories of change, but also some of the challenges that still exist. And so we thought, what better opportunity than to have a great conversation with her about that. And who better to do that than the two women that we have here today who have spent their entire lives in public service, guiding and saving lives through their wisdom. Dr. Cathy Slemp and Dr. Amy Acton. Cathy is a fellow board member and a volunteer for Deep Griha USA. She is also the former commissioner and state health officer for the great state of West Virginia, our neighbor. I always enjoy listening to Cathy talk about her time spent volunteering in Deep Griha in 1984 and the impact and how it informed her decision to focus on public health. And we're especially grateful that our very own Dr. Amy Acton has joined us here today. Many of us watched her every day talk us through those dark days of the pandemic. Her professional wisdom and dedication saved many lives here in Ohio, and we are always grateful for your service. I can't tell you how excited I am to hear these amazing, strong women talk to us who have dedicated their lives to the betterment of others, talk to us today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Cathy Slemp. She's going to introduce the rest of this program.
So thank you, Pavan. It is my joy to be here, no doubt. And I'm going to ask one more question of the audience here. How many of folks are fairly new to Deep Griha? Awesome. Look at this. That's why we love to have group events like this. So I think you're in for a treat tonight and opportunity to learn and grow in new ways. So I love intersections and connections, I will tell you. And I will say that a wise man, it's the same one who I happen to have the honor of calling Dad, who is at my table over here at 93. Once told me that it's in life's intersections where different worlds and people and cultures collide that is sometimes life at its richest. I think about estuaries and where tides rise and fall, and there's salt water and fresh water, and it nurtures and grows some of the most amazing ecosystems. And so I think tonight, I hope we'll have that mix. I truly have the joy here of connecting two really remarkable women with us together in conversation. And while they come from very different cultures, I can vouch for the fact that they are equally vibrant and passionate, accomplished yet humble, and truly genuine. I have had the joy of knowing them both for some time, really, and I can't wait to share them with you. So let me tell you a little bit about both of them. I could do this all night, so I'm going to have to be short. But Dr. Acton, Amy, has really spent her 35-plus years career helping set the conditions where all can live to their full potential. It's much more than COVID. It's been a lifetime and a career of work, and it will continue to be so, which is what we're excited about. She has been a professor of global health. She has served as the Vice President of Humankind. How many have that title? At the Columbus Foundation. That's human:kind, which you will learn more about, I'm sure. And directed a nonprofit here in Columbus called Rapid 5. She's also, as you know, served as the director of the Ohio Department of Health through COVID, where she was recognized nationally, and I know among our colleagues, to be really for how she not only used her public health skills, but her ability to communicate. I have had the joy of really experiencing Amy as colleague and friend. From her first few days as a new state health official, where I remember her saying, "I don't know if I can do this job, Cathy." And I said, "Oh, yes, you can." To late night conversations through COVID around where we really shared the wrestling issues of how do we maintain social cohesion and community connections in a world that felt like it was rapidly falling apart. Because we knew that that was the piece that was going to bring us through as community more than anything else that we could do in public health. She's a deep thinker, she is a passionate advocate, and honestly, one of the most genuine people I know. What you see is what you get. And speaking of competent and genuine leaders, we are also really thrilled to have Ashlesha Onawale here with us in person. She's been the director of Deep Griha now for 9 years. Associated with, that's hard to imagine what it is, and has really built it amazingly into what it is today. She did her just to give you a little bit of her background, she did her studies in commerce, which she can tell you some other stories about that, but just studies in commerce, and then she followed that with her master's in sociology and did some postgraduate work in development management. So right up the alley of what she does today. She just didn't know that she was heading for this job. While around Deep Griha her whole life, her path to leadership was not a linear one. And I'll let her tell that story sometime. It's a fun one. But really on a personal level, I've really had the joy of knowing Ashlesha now for probably 4 decades. From the curious and fun-loving young girl when I first met her in the 1980s, to really the competent and capable and continually growing leader of a nonprofit that really impacts the lives of 100,000 people annually. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Hello, everyone. First of all, Cathy Dr. Slemp didn't fully introduce herself. I think many of you know her, but she really was a hero during COVID, but also her whole career. And I did meet her on my very first day of training at the CDC, where new health officers go and learn everything, and I did. She was a long experienced person in governmental and public health, and so she became a mentor, and then we did have some long, hard, really, truly deep conversations as health directors navigating what you saw us go through. So it is an honor to be here, an honor to be here to celebrate this organization. And I just want to say, first of all, I know my voice might be triggering for some people. If you're hearing it right now, it probably brings back a little bit. And I hope we, never forget how wonderful it is to be together all in the same space, in the same room. I remember at the beginning thinking, I can't wait for that day again. And here we are. How did I end up doing what I was doing on your TV? I'd never imagined that. I remember thinking, it's the Ohio News Network at 2 p.m. Nobody will watch this the first time we went out. But as you know, it became a place where we all ended up showing up together. And as I was sharing at dinner, there were times it was just the governor, lieutenant governor, and I, and one cameraman, because we had to sequester the governor. He was at risk for getting COVID. And one dark lens, like one camera lens, which is just that circle you see back there. But you literally could feel all of us on the other side. It was a profound experience, an honor of a lifetime. I did not know the governor when I met him. So how does someone in our field end up doing what we do? The only question the governor asked me when he had seen some work I was doing at the Columbus Foundation, actually, on youth homelessness, someone saw my work for 1 hour, introduced me to him. And his only question was, how did you grow up? Tell me about your childhood. And so he was kind of disarming in some way that I can't quite put my finger on it, but I just was very real with him. I said I had a really rough childhood. I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, and I'm probably not the only one in this room, because we know that in some cities around Ohio, 50% of kids live in poverty right now. In Youngstown, they do. East Cleveland, Portsmouth. Poverty, neglect, abuse, at one point living in a tent in the winter, still going to school, and was removed from that finally at the age of 12. And one of the things that always haunted me was that the kids at all my old schools, and that they were just as nice and just as smart as the kids at my new school, where I got to stay in one place for 7 years, got into med school, the BSMD program, accelerated program in Ohio right out of that. But our lives just went different ways. And I literally had moved 1 mile away from the last place I was, where I was living in a basement for a year and a half, a dark basement, but with a little light bulb, and by the way, libraries, reading a book a day I got from school that let me know that life could be different, right? And libraries right now, big thing to be paying attention to. But literally moved 1 mile. And what I didn't recognize then was that I was learning that your zip code can determine how long you will live and what kind of life you will have, so much more than your genetic code. And then when I went to med school, I still remember the World Health Organization defined health. And it was like this profound, it was like 1984 when you were traveling to India. They said it was a complete state of physical, emotional, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease. It is your capacity for possibility to live your fullest life and reach your fullest potential. And I thought, well, that's not what I'm learning about. We don't learn about health, we learn about sick care. And it turns out that we gained 30 years life expectancy in the last century. I just did a PBS docuseries called The Invisible Shield. It's still streaming on PBS. It goes from the Black Plague to now. And what you realize is that the average age in 1900, when my grandfather was born, was 48. Like Thoreau lived to be 48 when he did Walden Pond, okay? Now people live longer and shorter. Of those 30 years that we gained, only 5 of them were due to everything I learned in medical school. The really high-tech things that we want to have and you need to have in one incident when you're not feeling well. All the 25 years we gained came from things we can only solve collectively. It started with clean water, good, safe food, child labor laws, traffic safety laws, getting PFAS out of our water, figuring out sewer systems and architecture and built environment. The list goes on and on. The hard things we face have to be solved collectively, and it takes multiple systems coming around a table to solve them. I remember when I swore in, and I joke that I was the Ted Lasso of politics swearing in. I remember testifying my first testimony in front of a big budget of billions of dollars, and I recognized that no one even knew what public health was in the work that we're going to talk about tonight. And I remember saying that if I do everything right, if I knock it out of the park in my field and prevent something, you don't see it, therefore you don't fund it, and we have to see it again. Cue in measles, right? And so these are the things we gain together, and this might be the first generation that does not live as healthy and as long of lives as their parents did. So these are things that we've grown a little complacent about, grow to take for granted, but they're really the gifts that are solved by all of us. So I think today we will be talking more about the fact that a third of the things that affect your health and well-being and your prosperity are in your control. The other two-thirds of things are things that come from things that are in the conditions that surround us that we don't even see anymore, but they're there lifting us, and we want to live in a world where we lift all boats, and you are doing this amazing work. But you look at a person in the context of their relationships and their families, because guess what? We don't live in ideologies in our day-to-day lives. We live in relationships. And then you look at the places you work and you play and you go to school and where you age. You look at the policies and the institutions that surround us. It's these growing concentric circles. And to solve any problem, as you are doing, you have to do all of it if you really want to move the needle. I'll end with this. The Surgeon General, the last Surgeon General, did an advisory. Like C. Everett Koop, when he did the tobacco advisory in the 80s, you don't do an advisory unless you know a lot about it and you know how to make it better. Our last Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, he decided, and after studying 20 years of data, that the underlying thing under all epidemics, whether it be the opiates epidemic or heart disease or poverty or housing, was social isolation. He did a warning about creating connection. That underlying all this, there's 20 years of data all over the world, and in some countries they're actually creating czars of connection, where they're doing exactly the kind of programming that you are doing, where the elderly are coming in with the young people, and they're purposely weaving our fabric back. Because in the 1990s, Robert Putnam wrote a book. If anyone remembers this, it was called Bowling Alone. And it was the beginning of our understanding how we're being pulled apart. You're here tonight because you're people who do not look the other way. You value on a Friday night coming together in community. And I'm telling you, this is the way back from all that divides us. And it starts at the grassroots level, and I'm honored to be here and join you in a conversation about well-being and health and making all boats rise. So thank you.
I think Dr. Amy set the stage for me and what I'm going to talk about, but also was a tough act to follow. I'm going to be talking about Deep Griha and 50 years, and I'm really sorry to everyone who's been part of my presentation over the last month. But for the new ones here, I'm going to talk about how we started and what we do. Deep Griha is celebrating 50 years this year. In 1975, when the founders started with a one-room clinic in our home, the founders were my parents, I don't think they had the 50 years in their mind at all. It was about doing what we could do at the time. Today, we have 5 different centers that we work out of. We're reaching 5,000 people directly and more families indirectly through the year. Our founders, Dr. Neela and Reverend Bhaskar Onawale, were here. I think it's been mentioned. They were here in the 72 to 74. This is where they first shared their dream of what they want to do and when they go back. The first supporters, the people who made Deep Griha possible, are among us today, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for your partnership over the years and bringing us here today. And it's not just a partnership with the seed, but it's partnership that's continued to help us thrive, help us grow, and help us to be who we are today. Thank you. When we started, like I said, I don't think they had 50 years in their mind. But what they did do is lay an incredible foundation for us to get here. Listening to the community, changing and adapting to the needs of the community. An organization that started with a one-room clinic, the clinic identified malnourishment as an underlying issue. It led to a special nutrition program. A special nutrition program highlighted that under 5-year-olds needed longer hours with us so that they could get the nutrition they needed, leading to a daycare facility. Just one after the, it wasn't as linear and as simple as I'm making it sound, but that is how we have grown. That is how we continue to work. This is a snapshot of how we have evolved. I'm not going to go into all the programs that are mentioned here, there's far too many, but it shows you that we started and stopped a lot of programs based on what was needed in the community at a particular time. I will touch upon a workforce development program that we do with the Tech Mahindra Foundation, where we train young people, 18 to 30-year-olds, in basic employability skills and make sure that they have a job at the end of it. So it's last-mile connectivity as well. And the reason I mentioned this program is in this last year, we've trained over 70 young people with hearing impairments and made sure that they have a job at the end. This is something that the families are really, really happy about, just the independence that it brings. Our core programs. Currently, our core programs focus on access to education. Deep Griha Academy is a rural school, 30 miles outside Pune. Parents wanted English and computers for their children, possibly for better opportunities in the city. We realized that young people were dropping out of school but didn't want to go back to agriculture, which was all around them. We recognized that an 8th grade school dropout has very little to offer the society. So keeping all these things in mind, when we started Deep Griha, growing food has been part of what we do at school, right from preschool onwards. We want to make sure that education and agriculture are not mutually exclusive, but something that can help each other. We make sure that our children have access to holistic development opportunities, ensuring that they have multiple options once they finish with us. We don't want them to be just one or the other, making sure there's more options and opportunities available. The sponsorship program. It's a program that works with young people who come from single-parent homes, children who have been orphaned. Often there's extended family, but with the financial means, it's a little difficult. And this is where Deep Griha comes in. We make sure that access to education is not, there are no barriers. They have continued access to education. We support them right through school, college, up to the time that they're able to stand on their own 2 feet. It's a long-term association. It is not it's a deep intervention, which we're very proud of. Apart from academics, we also make sure holistic development opportunities, access to counseling, any kind of help that the children need, basically. I think one of the things I was mentioning was aspiration. You talked about books being your aspiration. We make sure our children have access to people who can be role models, people who make them want something more than what they're seeing around them. And this is, I think, one of the biggest things that we bring to the children outside of the access. An extension of the sponsorship program is the City of Child, a residential facility. We have up to 52 boys living there. And again, it's primarily for access to education, but it looks at healthcare, it looks at everything that they need in those years, 6 to 16. In those growing years, we make sure our children are as well prepared for the world as they possibly can be. In the new developments, this also speaks a little bit to the direction we would like to head in. The diabetes research or study that we're doing with Cornell, we're working to we've trained 12 community health workers to conduct diabetes testing of gestational and postpartum diabetes for women from low-income communities at home. So this works with Deep Griha's view of what we want to do in multiple ways. We have the community taking the lead in what they want to change in the community. These 12 community health workers are changing health outcomes for other women from their community through this testing. And we hope that it opens doors for long-term work with the government, because obviously there are restrictions on what public health is able to do in India with 1.2 billion people. And we hope to hold their hand and say, we can do this. And it's actually the community that's going to be doing this. So this is definitely something that takes Deep Griha into the future that it wants for itself. Asimit works with women, again, from the low-income communities. And Deep Griha has been working on skill building since the 80s. This one focuses on connecting those skills to income generation. So what we have is a tiffin program. It's a lunchbox program where people can order meals. The women make them and supply them with the tiffin or lunchbox or dinner box, depending on when they want it. Early 2023, in a quarter, we had 70 orders of lunchboxes. Last month, we did 4,500 in a month. And it's been incredible to watch these women grow, women who'd never stepped out of home before, women who had to have permission to actually go out and do something for themselves, women whose voice at home has changed because now they're bringing in an income, women whose confidence levels have changed. We had somebody who attended our computer class, and she went from somebody who didn't want to speak to you because she didn't have the confidence, to somebody who was presenting at our all-team meeting, collecting data, doing data entry, ensuring that the profits are doing well, looking at where they're spending too much money, keeping that in mind. They're learning how to ride a bike just now, so that in April, they can start doing the delivery themselves, because they realized that they were spending money on delivery and paying somebody else, which they could save and divide among themselves instead. So these are the small steps of growth that we're proud of being a part of. And the last one is senior citizens. We work with individuals over the age of 60. The primary focus has definitely been access to government programs, making sure any documentation needs are taken care of so they can access what is available. Beyond that, it's healthcare access, right from a general clinic, medicine that is needed, to specialist treatments, to operations, to physiotherapy, basically a wide gamut, but all through networking, all through partner organizations. Through all this interaction, we realized that providing certain things was not enough. There was the social aspect. There was a well-being aspect. There was people were missing interaction, missing connection, especially post-COVID. And our job was to make sure we gave them a space to come together, hang out, spend time, have fun moments. So we have, the dance class. So it's movement therapy, but it's a dance class for them. Fun activities to come together for, movie time. And my favorite one, which I will end with, is we have our seniors going to the City of Child for a picnic. So the young people living at City of Child are setting the stage, preparing activities for the seniors to come and do with them. So it's a little bit like grandparents visiting their grandchildren. And it's a beautiful connection. I think Dr. Amy touched upon that. That connection makes a difference too, because we want a community that's looking after each other. And I'm happy to answer questions after. Let's go up here. Oh, straight on? And this mic, I'm definitely not used to this.
We're all getting used to it. We learn it. So I want to first thank you both.
Thank you.
They were wonderful to learn more about both the work that you're doing and to lay the groundwork for us. And then I always just get excited to hear the day in and day out pieces of what's happening at Deep Griha. But I want to touch on one of the things that you brought up, Amy, and that I think is so core at Deep Griha, and that's that social connection piece. And talk a little bit about some of the work that you're doing here in that. Maybe think about some of the stories that you've had as you've crossed generations or other things. Why is that so important in the work that we do?
Well, I think for me, there's been many opportunities to learn about this, but the one that sticks the most with me is the work I've done on kindness with the Columbus Foundation. And kindness seems like a fluffy concept. People think, that's niceness where you sort of fake do something and then, that. But during COVID, I had this experience. As you know, as things got tougher, there was a mom that did a sign that said, "Act on love, not hate," in Bexley, where I live. And those signs started to go everywhere in Ohio. It was a play on my last name, which I thought was very clever. Would never have thought of that. But I remember amongst all the memes we were using as things started to get more tense, remember the Not All Heroes Wear Cape shirts? That was done by Homage, the t-shirt company, and it raised money for youth homelessness that went everywhere. But the thing I had started to recognize, as we all did, was that there was something a lot more contagious than a virus. And that was fear and intolerance for ambiguity. Hate is a lot, kind of a feeling of more control sometimes. And when I'm a population-based person, you could almost start to feel that we were living under so much stress that it's sort of like we're all living from our amygdala, like our fight, flight, or freeze, more than we can access sometimes here. On average, we all have good days and bad days. And kindness, as I started to research it for the Columbus Foundation to give it some gravitas, I started to realize all this research on it's an age-old, enduring principle in every religion, in every mythology, in every society. To be kind and connect with yourself is, I think, the hardest one. The inward one is the one I always trip up on. But to outwardly, it literally changes your biochemistry. And so in doing these things and doing the dance and the movement, that does, but in going to the younger kids and being generative, it does. And in the end, kindness is not weakness. I just want to say that. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. We all too often mistake it that way. But kindness is fiercely seeing the humanity in one another. It is just that, like, we refuse to not see one another. And that can't help but make you want to connect. We're just hardwired for connection. And there are so many intentional ways in our society, in our programs, with individuals, but you're creating community, and then before you know it's 100,000 people. It spreads. It is contagious. So we can either spiral up or spiral down in our connection, but we have to be intentional.
You do.
And
so that's been my experience.
Oh, connection is what brings us to where we are today. I mean, connecting the dots, for one, between malnourishment but connection of people. I think if we didn't have the relationship that we had with the community, I don't think we would know of what they were dealing with. Or we could have just an idea of, this is what we're going to do, this is what we see as a thing that needs to be done. But if we didn't listen, I don't think we would have survived to reach 50 years. And I think that connection with the community is why we are still able to have multiple partnerships with other organizations who want to do something, but they're like, oh, but you have the community, so can we speak to you? And because we've already built the trust and that connection, we become the place that other organizations come to bring something bigger for the community. And I think that connection is something that we're intensely proud of. I think something that I didn't mention was, for the connection, was our 100% of our field staff comes from the community that we work with. There are listening ears. There are connecting us to the community in a very real way.
We have that relationship. We have a society that is always at odds with each other so much now. But I think when you go back and look at how do we change, how do we grow, it is not out of fear, it is not out of correction, but as human beings, we grow out of our gifts and our strengths. And so even in public health, we're really good at saying, oh, here in West Virginia, I have the worst statistics on X and Y and Z, and we're number 51, and et cetera, et cetera. But we don't change that way. We change by identifying those strengths, and it's in our assets. And saying, what gifts do you have? What gifts do I have? What can we do together? Not I'm here to serve you, but because we are together in partnership and connection. And that is, I think, how we grow individually. I know that's where you meet folks at the ground level, where they are. I know in West Virginia we have lots of work around substance use. I don't know if that's I'm sure it's an issue here as well. And many of what they call deaths of despair, et cetera. But we will talk about the fact that the opposite of addiction is not recovery. The opposite of addiction is connection. And it's in that connection and in that growth that you begin to see agency and change. And so that's, I think, think I've been part of that connection because we were able to draw out from each other
Yeah.
and collaborate with, not for, but with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's just a real longing for it right now. I mean, I'm having this privilege of traveling all over the state right now, and I said something about it doesn't know, we don't live in ideologies, and a lot of our imagination is captured in it right now. Many of the problems and things we all struggle with, though, in our real lives, don't really care if you're Democrat or Republican or an independent, and when I hear people everywhere I go, underneath sometimes anger and a lot of times fear and just caring a lot. There's a lot stuffed in people right now. They are longing for something, to belong, to feel like they matter, to feel this. Like it's and as doctors, I guess we're just, we're taught to listen and hear the symptoms, and I think that you just hear that right now. So even though it feels very chaotic sometimes and painful, often I've also noticed those disruptive times are when we recognize that humanity and start to change again. And so it can go either way. It can bring out, the fear in us, but it can also bring out the want to do something. And so I'm so impressed, again, by what you've been able to accomplish. And you also do it by flexing, it sounds like, with what people need over time.
I think being flexible is definitely what's helped us to get here. But also connecting the dots, because I've learned so much in these last 4 weeks, being exposed to different conversations. I don't know if I can bring that up here, but I crashed a meeting which was talking about free housing. Those who visited India would recognize that housing should come up as an issue more often than it does. But it's not coming out the way it does here. And that for me was a big learning. Like, you look at housing that people in India, the people that we work with are living in, and I was surprised when I was sitting in on that meeting, and I'm like, oh, this one's different, this one doesn't really, and then I'm like, wait, why doesn't it? Because our housing needs to be questioned. That's a starting point, because there are certain things that we have sort of accepted as a way of being. So there was differences and similarities. Talking about substance abuse, the communities we work with struggle with alcohol. Now, Deep Griha doesn't have the expertise for it, but we try and collaborate with other organizations who do. And on a completely, so connecting housing and substance abuse, I have a small story, is we had young students from a local college who did a crowdfunding, because we had showed them 3 houses that seniors lived in, which were in a really bad state. So they did a crowdfunding to fix one of the houses, and they picked the one that they wanted to focus on. The house was fixed, and the son who lived in that house, who used to be an alcoholic, stopped. And it was not we didn't expect that side effect. We didn't expect a house fixing to fix something else, and it was incredible to see. I don't know if it's a permanent thing, but it's something that made him change what he was choosing. And just lifting one side, I think you call it lifting the boats, but lifting one side helps the other side sort of settle.
It does. It really does. So speaking of youth, talk a little bit about why it's so important, scientifically and community-wise, to tap into that early childhood time and to the youth. Especially in a world that's dealing with trauma and substance use and other kinds of things, and that there are things that we can do about it. But it's the groundwork, of why that's so important, because it does affect how our brains are forming as a child with ACEs.
Right. We've learned so much about development over the years. And by the way, just in case you're on the other side of the age group, we never stop growing and developing. It's been the privilege of being with people in their last moments as a doctor, and they're still growing and changing. So, but early childhood obviously has a tremendous effect. We talk a lot about ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. And again, I'd like to say these are rare in this country as the young people you're working with. But as we know it is all too common. And it doesn't always know poverty. We know that kids are suffering, in all sorts of places. And so for me, as a child who went through maybe a lot of that, I think the scale is at like 10 or something, and at some point it was like 7. But it also, you said something important, it's also your strengths. Like, I remember thinking, if you can have the right supports and mentors and stability, schools are something we talk a lot about now, but for me, food at a school, just caring other adults, the things that you can get in a place that provides that safety, it can make a big difference because you know that, like I said, life can be better than it is, or not all things are this way. But the fact that it can be intentionally done for our children, that we see them, I think my biggest fear is when we don't see it. And I do remember as a kid, and I talk about this sometimes because I have this thing about looking the other way. We're all going down the street and you see something, you don't know what's going to tug at your heart or just make you stop, and you pause. And sometimes we try to not see it, because we're like, oh my God, I've got to go pick up the kids. I've got to go to, oh, did I just see that pet? We were just talking about my little dog, Winnie, at OSU back here. And you see that animal crying, and you're like, oh, I didn't see that kitten. That doesn't have a mother. Okay, I saw it. And you go back, right? So when you don't look the other way. And I do remember as a kid, and I'm sure these young people have experienced this, people do look the other way. Grown-ups look the other way. I remember as a kid, people not wanting to play with you because you are dirty or you look different or kind of smell funny. I mean, I'm just trying to be real about this. But then you remember the people who didn't. And I remember people doing those random acts of help. My brother and I'd walk to school and they'd pull us up on their porch to make sure we got a meal. So the thing is, like, you do have these villages, these networks you build, and those very same traits, like you have an ACE, so say some people in this room probably do, and maybe it's like you're hypervigilant. COVID, it was really great to be hypervigilant. It gets you out ahead of things. It helps you see things other people don't see. And I'm so grateful, and I'm sure the kids coming through your system are very grateful that there are adults and people that help them see those same things as strengths. And it doesn't mean they ever go away, but you can help transform them.
This is true. That's all that was coming to my mind. It was the sponsorship program is trying to be that adult who sees the children who need to be seen and hears the children who need to be heard. And that's the space we're trying to create at our centers, and we're trying to do more and more of that, just to have them come into the center more often and spend time here, make sure that what they want to share is heard, that they recognize this as a safe space to share and talk about what they want to. And we're doing little things. So I think you mentioned library, and we're trying to make sure that our library in the urban, so the school and City of Child does have libraries, but our urban centers used to, and now we want to bring it back. So bringing libraries back, we have a science lab that's been set up, which is very exciting, and I'm excited to go back and see what we can do with it. But just creating a space for children to come and have this positive side, because life at home is extremely difficult. And we want to be that oasis that sort of gives them that comfort for as long as we can.
And it is about more than just the emotional, physical support, because we know that those kinds of experiences change the way our brains develop. So when we are able to provide that support, provide that connection, we really are letting that child's brain develop in a whole different way, and their coping skills develop, because without that, we know that our risks of heart disease, lung disease, cancer, depression, substance use, incarceration are all much, much higher risks. And yet we also know now, excitingly, that there are things that can be done, and that those positive childhood experiences can really have an impact and counteract that effect. So when you're doing that with that child, you are not just fixing that moment and changing that moment. You are rewiring their brain and their capability and their emotional capacity to connect and grow in different ways, and changing them long term with that. You had a great story about one of the students that came through you through their programs. Share about the.
So I visited Mid-Ohio Collective Farm, which had a lot of exciting things happening there, especially with hydroponics and just And I was really excited to share. One of our children, who was a school dropout when he was younger, so he became a part of our non-formal education classes. He was streamlined into a school, went to City of Child, struggled there because his foundations were not as strong, and our public schools are so stretched that the teachers don't have patience to sort of, fix the learning gaps. He went back home for a holiday and didn't want to come back because he just found school to be too much. But then he did lots of odd jobs with his family, with his father, and he realized that, not his father actually, his uncle, but he realized that, oh wait, I had it better at City of Child. So he came back, and he was like, when he came back, he's like, I decided that no matter what, I was going to finish my schooling, and only then sort of, I wouldn't leave otherwise. He finished his schooling, did his undergrad degree. He took his time. He took his time to do it, but he's graduated now. He's working with a company, and he's working with Asimit, the income generation program for women, part-time. And he developed, so he's been helping with how do you collect the data, what do we need to look at, how are we looking at a profit and loss. He did study commerce too, so he was able to sort of give some input there. He helped with the digital marketing for whatever the women were doing, spread the word, did it in a way that was easier. He also built a hydroponic system using pipes, and that sits on the terrace at Tariwala Road, at our Deep Griha urban office. And he was able to show me one tomato plant, so we have to see how it works. But it's really exciting that he's sort of part of growing what Deep Griha wants to do. And the thing is, if we're able to do this, I think we spoke about this in the afternoon today, was if you're able to do this in a small way, the implications that can happen for the community are much wider. So I'm quite excited about our children being part of what we're doing today and taking the work forward. I love that story.
It's always the best. Those are always the best. The work, this kind of work, the work that you do, and we all do, as Pavan said this morning, it's not just about others changing, it's about us changing and learning and growing. And we keep learning through all of life. Talk about, for each of you, a little bit of what are some of those key lessons you've learned, and kind of how have you changed doing this kind of work? What insights have you gathered that make a difference to you? Thank you.
I will say that the work has always been the same. I think you mentioned seeing me during COVID, but what I recognized through COVID, and in Ohio, and I say this because many of you were a part of this, we did something differently here, and it's been studied a little bit, but I recognized all of a sudden that it was something that came both from childhood and my training in population health, which is your patient is whole groups of people. In my case, in Ohio, it was 11.7 million patients that we had, right? You had
bigger practice.
Right, it was a larger practice. But what you saw we were doing together in COVID, I think they said we did it differently in Ohio. We were three things. We were brutally honest in Ohio. We put the cards on the table, and our training taught me that the wicked hard things, if you want to solve housing in Columbus, for example, or community health workers, like that was a big one for us. I was in Rwanda, post-genocide Rwanda, and I'm a global health teacher at OSU. And the infant mortality rate in Rwanda was lower than it was a block from OSU's campus. And I was like, how could this be when we spend twice as much as any other country? But it was this solution of getting people from the community that could do this work and were trusted. And of course, that is exactly what you're doing. But all of these problems, when you do it, you gather people, but you got to put the cards on the table, because you can't solve stuff you won't name and just be honest and real about. And even in COVID, we got known for saying we don't know the answer. And strangely, people were comforted by that instead of scared by that, because it was just true. But what we said was, like, here's how we're going to solve it. And the solving was being more authentic and real and naming things. But the third thing they said is we asked more of people. And see, in COVID, this is a very important, I'm just going to use this lesson because it's one I share with everyone here. See, we didn't write an order that flattened the curve in Ohio, and we now know we did. We did lose a lot less lives in neighboring places. We got open in businesses and back to life earlier, and we got through it, but it wasn't because of an order. What it was telling you what we knew, and then you literally had to run your business or your hospital or your nursing home or your prison or your school or your family life. You had to solve problems that you had never solved before. All of us went through this. We were talking about what did church do during this time and how did you solve it? And the thing is, you did it. You rode hard. Like, I saw the beauty of being able to have a North Star that you can aim at and say a common purpose. And then we all rode toward it with as much common sense as we all could for the common good. And that's actually how you solve the wicked hard things. And again, I just think that's so important because not unlike 9/11, where you didn't know a stranger on the street for about 4 days, like the whole world felt a connection. In COVID, it actually, a very hard time, I'd say almost 6 weeks, before things got a little political and all the other stuff started to happen. But I saw the power of us all doing that together. And it really was this basic thing about putting people around the table, and you sit around the round table and you go, who's not here? Who's missing? Who could tell us their lived experience or thing? And you think outside the box of your little silo. I live in healthcare, but you live in business, and you live in schools, and you live in nonprofits, and you get everyone, and that's when you start to solve. Because the hard things, if we could have solved them, we would have done it already. So the thing is, it doesn't matter what scale you're at, whether you're trying to run a state in an emergency or you're doing in your community, it's still that same process of rowing together to the common good. And I just have to say, in my lifetime, I often say, I have so much hope still, but hope is optimism with a plan. That's my definition of hope. You need a plan. Optimism, I see it as a little equation. Optimism plus plan equals hope. And the thing is, we got a lot of work to do yet to co-create the world we want to live in, and we don't get to rest. We got to do it generation after generation. And we got to do it from wherever we sit, whatever calls us, because you never know what that thing is you won't unsee. But when it captures you and it takes you, and I hear, and I'd love to hear the story, that it was not an easy decision to go back and something your parents created, to come back and take on that responsibility of doing it, which I think...
Yeah. To do it your own way.
Yeah. I'd love to hear.
I've been asked this question a few times. What was it? How did you get into Deep Griha? And my short answer is kicking and screaming, because it was. My mother's hook was when I was 19. I came in. I was doing the accounts, studying accounts, but I was helping in the accounts office. But I think I spent 90% of my time outside, in the community, with the field staff, and there was a lot to learn. But when I did come back to work at Deep Griha later and had a little bit of a leadership role, one of the field staff said to me, she's like, you can't sit in these offices and decide what's happening there. And that was one of those moments which I have carried with me, that it will not be an organization, under my leadership. It wasn't like that then, but I made sure that we had the voice at the table. That has been what I have tried to do, is make sure that the Deep Griha table has all the voices it needs. And community continues. It's how we started. It was challenging, to say the least. I was going to say you're going to miss your basketball game if you ask me all my lessons. But I won't do that to you. There have been a lot of lessons. Leadership change, right, from a founding director to the one that follows, what the founding director's vision and operational style is, and stepping into those shoes, and when that happens to be your mother too. So it's complex, and there's been a lot of learning. But my favorite thing about Deep Griha that I have learned from watching it is how important the voices are, all representation. And that has been Deep Griha's strength, and I recognize it with all my heart, and we will continue to grow like that.
I think it's a new and different kind of leadership in some ways.
Sorry?
You know, it's a different kind of leadership.
It is.
Because it really is not simply, I'm the expert, here I am, let me tell you, even as a physician,
Right.
oh, here's the answer to your health issue. It is really about bringing the community together and saying, and putting the information on the table and talking about it and wrestling and solving it together. Because in that sense, we own it differently. And we come up with much better, my experience has been that we come up with much better approaches than otherwise. Otherwise, we're growing all kinds of things. So, quick question. Somebody had the question about with diabetes. They think of it as a problem with obesity, typically in the U.S. What is the background of it in Pune?
So India is growing with otherwise also. Yeah. But the numbers of people living with diabetes is definitely shooting up, and there is I'm going to call it a misconception that it is attached to obesity. Over the years, being attached to this program and learning so much from the Cornell team as well as the Pune hospital, an individual, Dr. Yagnik, who's been working with diabetes for, I think, 50 years. So he's seen like 2 or 3 generations.
Wow.
And there's the thing, I don't know how much detail, I'm a little nerdy about this because I just discovered it, but India has a fat-thin syndrome. So years of starvation have led us to store fat differently. And you'll have a 2.5, a baby that's smaller than a British baby, but the British baby's fat was lower than the Indian baby's. And that's just a small example of, it's not about obesity. We're bringing nutrition into the conversation, and how nutrition or changing what the woman is getting as far as nutrition goes can change her health outcomes too. Because it's not about cutting down stuff, it's about adding things that she needs.
That's great.
Ashlesha, somebody would like to talk a little more about the Girls Gearing Up program and how you're developing, speaking of leadership, how are we developing leadership and confidence in the next generation?
So we have a program called it's an organization in Germany that's called Girls Gearing Up. They run a leadership academy for girls. This is for 14 to 17-year-olds. Preparing them for leadership roles. Again, showing them role models, having that conversation, teaching them basic leadership skills in that age. 2019, we were lucky to have 2 girls from our school visit Germany for this 1 week. Young girls from rural India, whose parents have probably never traveled outside of Maharashtra, the state we are in, to girls who travel all the way to Germany on their own and had this incredible experience. Since the pandemic, we've had India hubs. So we have 20 girls who attend this week-long training in Pune. And the girls include girls from Deep Griha Academy, the sponsorship program, and other organizations. And it's a center of hope to have these young girls talk about what they see around them, what they want to change about the community that they live in, and what they're going to do about it once they step out. And the world can get you down sometimes, but those conversations really, really bring so much hope. And it's with a plan, because they actually have to do things.
They have to make a plan.
They have to do things through the year to make this happen.
Yeah.
So it is optimism with the
And
plan.
they're hearing it peer to peer.
That's great.
And it's peer-to-peer. It's not
It's-
nobody else is coming in. It's the children who are leading it.
Right. And they've linked into Children's Human Rights Days and other kind of activities.
Oh yeah, we had, sorry.
Go ahead.
We had some of our boys have been attending, an organization is leading a conversation on child's parliament. So the parliament, but for children, and how do you get a child's voice in what the parliament's talking about?
That's
So it's got these conversations happening, and 2 of our boys attended a session in Delhi, and they came back and had this conversation with the rest of the students. And again, another space of hope, just listening to these young people talking about these things that they want to do differently for their life, which is,
Right.
it's wonderful.
So I think this question actually leads into some of that. It says, Dr. Acton, the public health system is reviewing the issue of what to do with children during COVID. And I think we could say more broadly, how do we really, what have we learned through that experience? And how do we really create nurturing environments for children in difficult times?
Yeah, COVID and children was a really hard, just by way of background so folks know, what you saw us doing is something you hope you never have to do, but George W. Bush actually made the first pandemic playbook right after 9/11, as they were creating Homeland Security. They actually recognized that a naturally occurring pandemic or a biologic weapon were the two biggest threats to the United States security-wise. Like, if you take apart we've seen more people lost than all wars combined, all disasters combined. You take aside the suffering that, we all went through. It uncouples everything. It uncoupled the supply chain within, the economy had basically crashed before a single order was written. There's great data on that now, because our world was so interconnected. Like the surgical mask you wear in surgery, you couldn't make it in this country. The 3M mask, the inner layer, the machines weren't here anymore. So they had come up and started to war game. How would you save lives? How would you save the economy? And we got to be a part of the first to have to do it on a world scale.
And we didn't follow the plans that were made then.
And they were supposed to be plans run by the federal government, not us in states.
No.
But nonetheless,
we
states did it because secretly the governors got together. Republican governors got together and they started sharing what they were doing, and then they reached across the aisle to Democratic governors, and all fell away for a while. It was actually a beautiful thing in the beginning of people trying to save everyone. But the thing about it was you only pull that throttle if you went in the hospital in March of 2020. If you were in the ICU, your chance of dying was up to 50%. So 1 in 2, and it was not for. I know there are a few doctors in the audience, and it was not for healthcare workers. They're still traumatized because you would do everything you could. You'd be in an ICU and have all the equipment and be intubating someone, and it still wasn't enough. By 3 months later, June, that had dropped to 5%. So it went from 50% to 5% and went down from there. So you never want to have to do it. And those decisions were excruciatingly made by bringing all the best experts you could around a table, hour by hour.
Complex.
They were complex.
And I didn't mean to interrupt there, but I'm thinking back behind the scenes, and there was a lot of varying opinions. I remember being asked about this question of, every health officer got this question of, when do we close schools? And
schools was the last,
and to me, it was so interesting, because we knew in our state, we were late in getting disease here. You were having it rampant here more, and knew we'd be the last in the country, but it would hit hard when it came. But we wrestled with this issue of, we knew that our kids were getting lunches in schools.
That's right.
That they were, those teachers were the ones that had their eyes on those kids, and that then understood that there were issues at home and could link in the support systems. So I know when I and my education lead had this conversation, we were like, no, don't close schools yet here. Yes, they're doing this all around us, and that made incredible political pressure. But we're like, we're not so sure now is the time yet here, because we didn't have the same disease rates. We knew we might get there. Yeah. So I think every state was weighing it on their own different ways. And there were political pressures, there were practical pressures, there was the danger for teachers. So I think those are the complex things that you bring people around the table and do the best you can. And sometimes it's a collective decision, and sometimes it's the governor makes a decision, it's done, regardless of what you recommend.
But I would say, schools and kids, that was me as a kid. If I wasn't at that school, it was so you feel the weight of those things. Yeah. And I have to say, again, I'm very, very proud of Ohio. People don't realize schools were kind of closing on their own because there weren't cafeteria workers or bus drivers, or teachers were getting sick. So these things had an organic nature, but then we quickly learned more and then began the process of, how do you live with this? So I'd have to say, we know there's so much our kids, my husband he just stepped out for a second, but he's a 40-some-year elementary school teacher and a coach in Bexley. He teaches at the same school he went to since he was 4 years old, Cassingham Elementary. So and I do remember he came home and he had to learn how to use the computer and do all these things, but he wanted to stay connected to his kids. He couldn't stand not being connected to the kids. And so, I'm amazed at what we did to try to hold on, but there's so much more we know our kids need from us right now. So I would just say, I just want to acknowledge those were really hard things, and our kids need us more than ever. So we have a lot more work to do.
And we now have different ways to connect, and we need to continue making those ways to connect. So at the end of the day, it comes back to the same issues. It's about how do we connect, how do we support each other, how do we help each other grow with that.
Yeah.
Well, I realize time-wise that we are going to need to wrap up, but thank you so to both of you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
to
you for
the
having
audience.
me. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you. We will be around. I think we've got a closing.
Okay. What we have seen is a master class on working together, working collectively, whether it's here or across the globe. What has impressed me after my visit there and after being a part of this for a number of years is to realize that what we do here is in partnership, side by side with what is done in Pune, India. This is not a top-down organization. The board of directors here does not say what happens in India because Ashlesha and your staff, as we say, are on the ground and working day to day, identifying those things that need to be done and filling in the gaps for society, whether it's with health or with education. It's good work that's being done. I'll leave you with this and then point out one more thing. I served churches for about 45 years and would always close with a benediction, and we will have a prayer to close in just a few minutes. But this benediction, I'll give 3 lines, and this comes from some of the work of St. Paul. And it goes like this: Go forth into the world in peace, be of good courage, hold fast to that which is good. And I will say to you that this evening you have gone forth into the world in peace simply by fellowshipping and breaking bread together. Second, we say to you, be of good courage. By coming here this evening, you have challenged yourselves to look outside of your community and those things which you are most familiar with by hearing the stories of Ashlesha, and she has been to your churches perhaps also. Third, hold fast to that which is good. By supporting Deep Griha, you invest in the good work there in Pune, India, which has been going on only for 50 years. And I would like to think it is just the beginning. So make certain you look at the brochure, which is right here, and take a look at it. It says, change a child's life. May I challenge you to do this? Become a sponsor. It shows on here for $285, for $190, for $95. It gives how much you will be assisting a child there. I look at the one that sponsorship for a child for a year and note it would cost 1/2 of what I'm paying each month for my car lease. Now ponder that for a moment. I'm grateful for the work that's being done here, for what we have learned this evening, and for all who are a part of the board of directors and those who have gone to visit and those who come here to enlighten us. Dr. Acton said this: the hard things we face can only be solved collectively. Go forth, please.
Let me offer this prayer as we prepare to depart tonight, but so that you don't miss anything at all that God is doing here tonight, in you, through you, by you, maybe in spite of you. I want to invite you into this prayer with your eyes open. so that you can take in all that God is already doing right here, right now. Let's pray. God who never tires, we are grateful for the time shared tonight and for the new things you continue to create by us and through us. We remember you formed us not to do everything on our own, but to be part of your beloved community of neighbors caring for neighbors. We know that on our own, none of us can fully share your love, your justice, your compassion, or your peace. On our own, we can only accomplish so much. But when we come together as community, guided by your love and your wisdom, then we can accomplish much and care for many. So for the wisdom shared here this evening and your presence among us all, we give you thanks and pray that you would help us remain faithful and multiply all that we offer in mind and body and spirit. Now for the time shared tonight, for friendships formed, bonds created, conversations begun, insights received, hearts touched, health fostered, and aha moments, we give you much, much thanks. Bless us now in our leave-taking and our travels as we return to all the places we call home. Amen. Thanks, friends.